Welcome to Deloitte M&A Views, a Deloitte podcast series exploring the latest trends and topics in mergers and acquisitions. I'm Greg Jarrett. Today we'll discuss the vital role that board members can play in M&A transactions, including a much-needed focus on oversight. We'll also discuss several of the most important considerations for avoiding stumbling blocks and facilitating transactional value. The inconsistent track record of many deals, often caused by a failure to effectively execute, and the proclivity by shareholders to sue companies is, or should be, an area of importance to any company's board of directors. We're joined by Russell Thompson, a partner with Deloitte & Touche LLP, and Deloitte's U.S. M&A Services leader, and Joel Schlachtenhaufen, M&A principal with Deloitte Consulting LLP and founder of the Deloitte M&A Institute. Russell, I understand you recently led an M&A panel at a board symposium hosted by Deloitte's Center for Board Effectiveness. So why don't we start off with you giving us a quick rundown of what you heard from board members, like what is top of mind for them in terms of M&A?
What a great panel discussion and a question and answer session with a broader group of board members attending the event. We talked a lot about what an exciting time this is for companies not only seeking growth, but also searching for innovation, business models being disrupted, and convergence across industries and sectors, bringing new opportunities and challenges. But the one consistent theme identified that cut across each of these critical areas was M&A. And we discussed how the increasing levels of M&A activity bring new and evolving expectations for the board. Let me touch on a few of these themes and highlights. Firstly, innovation and disruption. We talked at length about change and disruption to business models. How is the board pushing management out of their comfort zone to address and explore these areas? Is management thinking outside of their industry, given the impact of technology on all businesses and convergence trends across industries and sectors, where it's now more likely that disruption will come from non-traditional competitors? And with all these considerations, how are companies looking to get the right capabilities and experiences, both within management as well as on their boards? The second area was around board priorities and the increasing role of the board. Here it was clear from the group that the board's level of involvement in M&A has continued to increase over past years, from strategy to due diligence to execution and the integration of a deal. Thirdly, we talked about the recent increase in shareholder activism and what now seems to be a permanent feature that management and boards will need to deal with. And then the fourth area was talent and culture. We focused on how the board can help navigate the challenges and disruption associated with M&A activity within an organization's workforce. And talent and culture was actually cited as one of the most commonly overlooked reasons for underperforming M&A deals.
Joel, let me go on to you now. What's your perspective on the urgency around management and board members playing more of a prominent role during M&A transactions? Do you see trends relative to this in the marketplace?
I would say from what we observe in the marketplace, and specifically the high variability of success in M&A transactions, management and boards would be well advised to deeply consider the risks associated with M&A transactions. To this day, there's still far too many transactions that destroy shareholder value once all of the integration dust settles, even though some are wildly successful. What people may not fully appreciate is that investor scrutiny of deals continues to increase significantly. And just one interesting point of note on that, in every year since 2008, shareholders have litigated against at least 54% of all deals valued in excess of $100 million involving Delaware incorporated companies.
Okay, Joel, so the topic of board involvement in M&A seems strongly encouraged. Let's talk high level about the role the board can play in an M&A transaction. Give me some thoughts, if you would.
Yeah, well, first, the board's role in the M&A process should only be that of oversight, obviously, simply as a matter of corporate governance. That said, boards should work with management to oversee all aspects of the M&A life cycle. So not just the front end, screening the right deal, executing due diligence, valuation, and ultimately approving the final deal terms of a transaction, but also the back end. So day one readiness, fully developed value capture plan, all the way through post-merger execution. Boards should have solid mechanisms in place to provide oversight and to continue to hold management to account throughout the life cycle.
Let's stay on the topic of M&A challenges, gentlemen. And in this particular instance, I'd like to ask this question of both of you. And Russell, I'll have you respond first. What are the predominant challenges, and what can be done to spot these challenges early in the process? I'm curious as to how board members can help identify these challenges and provide the encouragement needed to address them in an appropriate fashion.
Well, let's start at the beginning. The board should be involved early in the process to both understand and evaluate management strategy, and then how M&A plays a role in the inorganic aspects of that growth strategy. The board's role may also differ quite significantly depending on the types of transactions, whether those are life events, consider a merger of equal type transactions where they really should be involved end to end, including an ultimate assessment of the return on investment. But their role may differ if the company is looking at technology asset acquisitions or talent plays or, quite frankly, joint venture or alliance type arrangements. And so understanding the type of transaction you're looking at may impact the role that the board plays. But subsequent to the initial strategy evaluation, boards should get regular dashboard updates with an additional ability to also understand what is management's playbook and what are their processes and checks and balances to ensure that they get it right. The board and the management, quite frankly, should be working closely together to ensure that the playbook is followed and executed appropriately, including aspects around due diligence. Because don't forget, it's a robust due diligence process that allows for more informed assessments of the potential risks and the anticipated benefits of a transaction.
And Joel?
Yeah, I think Russell's exactly right. It's significantly about transparency. Boards should insist at each stage of the life cycle they have full transparency into what's going on so that they can exercise their fiduciary responsibility effectively. So in the area of M&A strategy, for example, we often see a lack of depth of understanding of where synergies and value will actually come from. Too often, it's kept at a high level with some high-level benchmarks that ends up not getting translated into tangible results and trackable results. As you step through the process and you get to the integration strategy, once a deal has been signed, again, we often see a lack of understanding of the true path to value and even more important, the investment required to get there. Unlocking value in large transactions very often requires transformational versus incremental thinking and requires significant one-time investment. And lastly, when we look at the area of integration execution, we often see a lack of uncompromising focus on value and a dedication to accelerating the plan and ultimately on holding leaders to account. I think boards can help by insisting on seeing the plan, both financial and operational dimensions, through understanding the linkages between timing and action of the investments and returns on those investments, and ultimately by creating management incentives and providing that oversight function that the boards should provide throughout the engagement.
Now, despite what companies state publicly, many deals continue to fail to achieve their objectives. Russell, what are some of the mistakes you've seen companies make when they plan for transactions? We've discussed the emphasis on securing the right deal. How do you make sure post-merger integration planning doesn't get lost? How can board members help the company spot those early and course correct before it becomes a real problem?
The board is in a unique position. Being independent puts the board member in a position to question and challenge management appropriately, as they have no financial incentives, such as completion or success fees. The board should oversee a transaction holistically, end to end, not just due diligence and transaction approval, but deal preparedness, the execution, the integration, and quite frankly, the assessment of the return on investment ultimately. And especially if you go back to how we started this conversation, especially in this world of disruption and technological challenge, whether a company and management are thinking outside the box and considering all aspects of a transaction, including those outside of their own particular industry, bringing that level of challenge to the boardroom, to the management, is critical in the environment that we live in today.
And your view on this, Joel?
Yeah, I fully agree. And in fact, board members should insist on visibility into the integration strategy, specifically thinking about the downstream portion of the transaction. They should understand major leadership decisions and the timing and implementation of those decisions from the leadership team. Once there's alignment with management on the integration strategy, the board should ask for a roadmap of key actions and investments and address progress at each regular meeting of the board. Boards should probe on whether management is deciding and prioritizing with self-imposed constraints, for example, things like internal resource capacity and over-indexing on cost to achieve. Sometimes it makes sense to make investments early on versus trying to achieve the results with the team that you have in place. Lastly, boards should insist on regular updates on timing and actions on critical issues, challenges, and milestones, and should have management provide a clear line of sight to how the value capture plan is aligning to actual results.
Russell, if you could summarize things for us today with the spotty track record of many transactions, which can be due to lack of oversight, I think we've all agreed on that, and the increasingly important role the board can and should play, what should boards be asking themselves as they work through a major transaction?
Greg, let's step back for a minute and put things in context and perspective. M&A activity can be an important component, sometimes, quite frankly, even a critical one for a company's growth strategy. So on the positive side, a successful acquisition can help a company make a quantum leap in terms of market presence, business model disruption, or filling gaps in a company's product or service portfolio, just as a few examples. On the other hand, transactions that don't ultimately perform as expected, including not providing positive returns or resulting in large negative surprises, can cause serious damage to companies and their boards of directors, ranging from litigation to the ouster of management and even board members. And with that as a backdrop, boards should be asking themselves, am I taking active oversight of the entire lifespan of a transaction, focusing on challenges from strategy, talent, technology, deal execution, integration, and the ultimate return on investment? They should challenge whether both management, third-party advisors, and the board have the appropriate capabilities and experiences. Does management have a comprehensive M&A playbook or approach to doing M&A? And who in the company is dedicated and accountable for delivering the value? What are the key milestones, and how will management inform the board of progress? And what is the definition of success defined up front, and how will it be measured? And finally, especially if the company is a serial buyer or seller of businesses, when is the appropriate point at which management and the board should conduct a review to see if the transaction met the return on investment or other objectives?
I'm Greg Jarrett. Thanks for listening to Deloitte M&A Views, sponsored by Deloitte's M&A Institute. This podcast is provided by Deloitte and is intended to provide general information only. This podcast is not intended to constitute advice or services of any kind. For additional information about Deloitte, go to deloitte.com/about. We also release new podcasts regularly, and if you subscribe, you won't miss a single one. To stay connected and receive more information on Deloitte's M&A service offerings, visit deloitte.com/us/MA subscribe and follow us on Twitter @Deloitte M&A. Until next time.